Okay. Hi, everyone. I guess we'll start.
Hello.
Hi. Hi on the phone. I'm Lindsay, if I don't know you. I think I know all of you, though. My background is in exercise and nutrition science. I'm a certified personal trainer and exercise physiologist through the American College of Sports Medicine. And I'm a clinical exercise specialist here at On Life. And today we're talking about improving our workplace health, primarily within the realms of sitting, standing, and desk job ergonomics. So if applicable, these are the continuing education credits that we'll receive today through today's session. Our objectives today are, first of all, to define and explore, the concept of ergonomics, hence why I'm using a garbage can as a desk right now. Review current research in workplace health and ergonomics. We will discuss prevention and treatment options for some common workplace injuries, and we'll, of course, have time to discuss and answer any questions at the end, too. So we'll first, it's okay, I'm comfortable. We'll first start with this question: what is ergonomics? Well, according to OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, ergonomics is fitting a job to a person rather than forcing that worker's body to fit the job. So we know that accommodating workstations, tasks, and equipment to fit the employee reduces the physical strain on that employee and therefore helps to prevent long-term injuries and disorders. So thankfully, the subject of ergonomics has been a topic of research for the last several years, and the whole point is to hopefully come up with sustainable solutions for employees at work. So how does my workplace environment affect my health? Well, musculoskeletal disorders, or MSDs, are a huge part of that. These, of course, involve our muscles and our skeletal system, but the musculoskeletal disorders also include our muscles, our tendons, ligaments, nerves, discs, blood vessels. All of those kinds of things are affected. And more than a third of all worker injury and illness cases are musculoskeletal disorders, so that's a lot. Some of the most common ones are carpal tunnel, tendinitis, arthritis, any type of muscle strain, a lot of low back injuries. Recent studies showed that neck and shoulder pain is the most frequently reported musculoskeletal disorder at this time. So aside from these musculoskeletal disorders, our emotional and our mental health is also affected by our workplace environment. This isn't typically because we don't like our jobs, but research is showing that when an employee goes to work and they're sitting or working in a certain way that's not conducive to their physical health, this is affecting their emotional health as well. And aside from that, more studies are showing that things like bright lights or blue lights on computers has a big effect on our mind and our mental health. So we're going to look at 4 studies today, just kind of do a really quick overview about what the most recent research is saying about ergonomics and workplace health. So the first of those is titled "Too Much Sitting: The Population Health Science of Sedentary Behavior." So to understand the big takeaways in this study, we first have to understand lipoprotein lipase, abbreviated as LPL. LPL is an enzyme that's found on the surface of the cells in our bodies, and we need LPL in order to be able to break down fats and to use those fats for energy or for storage. So this LPL activity is necessary for our body to uptake triglycerides, to produce HDL or good cholesterol, and for glucose uptake. So this is something that we already knew. We also already know that skeletal muscle contraction stimulates LPL activity. And on the opposite side of that, sitting suppresses skeletal muscle activity and thus halts LPL activity. So one of the big findings of this study was looking at what if we're just standing? We're not doing actual physical activity where we're running or walking or really seriously using our skeletal muscle. What if we just stand up? And they found here that standing recruits our skeletal muscles to contract isometrically, meaning that they're not moving through space, they're contracting, but they're standing still. So like when you do a plank exercise, your muscles are isometrically contracting. So when we're standing up, we're having to use our glutes, our hamstrings, our abdominal muscles, our back muscles to hold us up, and that's an isometric contraction. So they found that even an isometric contraction was enough to stimulate LPL, and that breaks in sedentary time proved beneficial associations with metabolic biomarkers, including waist circumference, BMI, triglycerides, and 2-hour plasma glucose. So that's a huge finding. So that means that just standing up throughout the day is helping us to lose weight, it's helping our lipid panel, and it's helping our blood sugar. That's pretty big. So another huge part of this study was a part that they called the couch potato phenomenon. And by this, they basically meant that too much sitting does not necessarily mean that we're not getting enough exercise. So they looked at adults who are meeting the physical activity guidelines, meaning that they're getting at least 30 to 60 minutes of exercise a day. But because they sat for most of the day, either at work, on their commute, at home watching TV, they were still at risk for these metabolic health conditions. So in conclusion, even exceeding the physical activity guidelines does not get you off the hook for those metabolic biomarkers if you are sitting all day long. Another part of this article that I thought was very interesting didn't have to do with workplace health, but they noted that each 1 hour increment of TV time was found to be associated with an 11 to 18% increase in the risk of all-cause and cardiovascular disease mortality. So just watching TV 1 hour a day can increase your risk by 11 to 18%, which was huge. So very important study. So we'll come back to that a little bit later. Another similar one was done by the CDC, and some of you may have heard about this one. It's called the CDC's Take a Stand project. So this was done with office employees, a very familiar sounding workplace environment that included administration jobs, customer service representatives, account management, health coaches, and management. So sorry, IT people. But yeah, very similar to our workplace environment. So the interventions in this study were measured over a 7-week period, where they gave the intervention group a sit-stand device for their workstation, which they could manually bring up if they wanted to stand and then manually put back down when they wanted to sit. And the control group just had a regular seated desk station. So the results of these were a little bit more subjective. They didn't do any biometric measurements, but rather they just sent out a survey to ask these employees how they were feeling at this point during the study. And this is what they found. A 54% decrease in upper back and neck pain for the intervention group who used that standing desk. They noted improved mood states overall. 87% felt more comfortable and more energized with the standing desk. 75% felt healthier. 71% felt more focused. More than 2/3 felt more productive and happier at work. And more than 1/3 felt less stressed at work, just from having that standing desk available. And they didn't really have any specific guidelines around how long they had to stand up during the day. It was just the fact that they were able to stand up without ruining their productivity. They could still work and be comfortable. So the sad part about this study was that after the 7-week intervention period was over, they removed the standing desk, and that negated all of these improvements within 2 weeks. So after 2 weeks, when they went back to sitting, all of these things went away. So aside from the whole sitting and standing issue, I'm sure we all know someone, or hopefully we haven't been that someone who has experienced carpal tunnel syndrome. This is becoming a big deal, not only in desk job type of jobs, but production and material moving jobs as well. So 25 days out of the year is the average amount of carpal tunnel related work time that is lost in America.
Sit down, listen to
Yeah, stand up if you like. So office and administrative support jobs, which is the type of workplace environment that we're in here, were among the top 3 occupation categories where carpal tunnel rates were the highest. And then they also noted that production and material moving jobs were listed as number 1 and number 2 respectively. So while this is in our workplace environment, a lot of our members that we talk to work in these production and material moving jobs. So we'll talk through some treatment and prevention options a little bit later. So keep those members in mind when we talk through those. Another study showed that for those who use computers greater than 5 hours a day, which isn't even a whole work day, were 7.5 times more likely to develop an upper limb disorder. That's a lot. Another big thing that I don't suspect is a new problem, but thankfully new research is coming out about it, is something called computer vision syndrome. And that's just the effect that our computer screens and our phone screens and our TV screens have on our eyes. So 75% of employees who work for 6 to 9 hours in front of a computer per day noted visual complaints. Now, a lot of these are short-term, so you might have a little bit of blurred vision, a burning sensation, maybe dry eyes, maybe watery eyes, but there are some serious long-term effects that come from this computer vision syndrome too. So astigmatism is one of them, and then myopia, which is also known as nearsightedness, is another. So these are 2 really serious eye effects. These are things that would cause a person to wear glasses or contacts for the rest of their lives. Yes, Barbara?
I had my detached retina.
Yeah, that's right.
That's one of the things that they talked to me about.
Yeah.
Not looking at the, like taking a rest.
Taking a break from the screen.
Away from the screen.
Yeah, that's huge.
And they said they see more of it younger people because of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, this isn't a new problem, but thankfully more research is coming out, so we know what to do about it. So we'll talk through some treatment and prevention options for those too. Speaking of, let's start on our treatment and prevention. So this all starts with ergonomically correct positioning. I love this graphic. This is from a Washington Post article. I have one pinned to my desk, and I admit that sometimes I look at it and I feel like I'm looking in a mirror. So it reminds me to sit up or stand up. But just look here. I mean, look at the pressure on the neck. We're supposed to have a beautiful like S curve in our back, and that is non-existent. A lot of pressure on our hips here, the rest of our joints, and this is how the average American looks when they sit in their office chair. So all of this treatment and prevention comes from starting with ergonomically correct positioning. We'll start with the seated position, and we'll just kind of go from the top down and look at where we should be. Look at this person's head. Their ears are above their shoulders. Their chin is not tucked into their chest. They're sitting straight. And notice that their eyes, their gaze is meeting the top of that computer monitor. It's not somewhere in the middle. So that monitor is placed at a height so that the gaze meets the top. And that's for a couple of reasons. The first is so that if you need to see something lower on your monitor, you should be able to just shift your eyes up and down without having to move your neck, which would cause injuries. And the other is that if your eyes do need a break from that computer screen, you should be able to just shift your eyes up and look at the back of your cubicle, your neighbor, the wall, whatever is behind your computer. So starting there, looking at the back posture here, notice that this person is making contact with the back of their chair. Most office chairs are designed to mimic that natural curve of the spine, so take advantage of that. Also with the hips, make sure that your hips are all the way back in that chair. Take advantage of the entire chair. We want, not exactly, it doesn't have to be an exact 90-degree bend in the hips, but somewhere close. We want a 90-degree bend in the elbows and a 90-degree bend in the knees as well. So making sure that our feet are touching the floor is big. If your desk height or your chair height doesn't allow you to do that, then think about getting a footrest so that your feet would touch the bottom of the floor. Aside from that, as far as the distance away from the computer monitor, an 18 to 30 inch distance is what's considered to be quote unquote safe, but a good rule of thumb for that is just to be an arm's length away from the monitor. And lastly, looking at that neutral wrist position, a lot of computers have that little kickstand on them, which is not conducive to an ergonomically correct position. So if we're putting that kickstand up on our keyboard, then our wrists are in an extended position all day long. So we want to achieve that neutral wrist position as often as possible. And then similarly, if we're looking at a standing position, we're still looking to be an arm's length away. We want to raise our desk up so that our gaze is still meeting the top of that monitor. Still want to keep our elbows at a 90-degree bend. Notice that this guy doesn't have both feet on the floor, and that's okay as long as his one hip isn't elevated all day long. So definitely good to switch position like that throughout the day. And these graphics actually came from the National Institute of Health has a great checklist on their website. If you think that your positioning at your desk might be a problem, then I can definitely get you that graphic. It's a pretty interesting checklist and gives you all kinds of tips of things that you might consider trying to switch around on your desk to be more conducive to that ergonomically correct positioning. So if we are not using this ergonomically correct positioning, chances are we are going to acquire one of these 4 very common injuries. There are definitely more than these, but these are the ones that we're going to go through today. So we'll start from the top with our upper cross syndrome. So notice the imbalances in these 4 postural muscles. We have in the front our weak neck flexors, which are supported by our very overworked upper trapezius. And then back to the front, a tight pectoralis compared to a weak lower trapezius in the back. So this upper cross syndrome has come to be nicknamed tech neck or text neck because when our head and neck are facing down, looking at our phone, reading our phone, looking at our computer or whatever, the muscles of our upper back and that cervical spine are having to contract and work a lot harder than they're supposed to hold our neck up. So this is a very powerful graphic here, I think. Consider that the normal weight of the human head is anywhere from 10 to 12 pounds. So when we are looking forward to read our phone, for every 1 inch or 10 degrees that we're bending our neck forward, we're adding 10 pounds of pressure to our cervical spine, 10 pounds that it's not meant to hold. So I look at like this guy in the middle, I think is typically how I look when I text. That's 40 pounds. That's 30 more pounds than my cervical spine was meant to hold. So it's no wonder your neck hurts. Luckily, though, we do have some treatment and prevention options here. My lovely assistant I know, he has modeled some wonderful exercises and stretches, and we're going to do them because we're sitting in an ergonomics presentation. So feel free to sit if you'd like to. You can stand up if you're more comfortable. Look at Aaron in this graphic here to the left. Notice first that his right arm is tucked behind the small of his back. So that's keeping his posture up, it's keeping his shoulders back and his chest up. So go ahead and tuck your right arm back there. Go ahead and turn your head about 45 degrees to the left. Gently put your left hand on top of the crown of your head and then look down like you're looking in your chest pocket. If this isn't enough of a stretch, then gently pull down with that left hand. Feel the stretch in that neck flexor. For the sake of time today, we're going to hold these for about 10 seconds, but typically hold any stretch for anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds, depending on your flexibility. So go ahead and gently bring your head back up, release the left hand, turn back to center, and release the right hand. Okay, let's do the other side. So left hand on the small of your back, turn the head 45 degrees to the right, right hand on the crown of your head, look down into your chest pocket, breathe through your stretch. And come back up. Back to the center and both hands down. Okay, so this next one here on the right hand side, Aaron is showing us a chest opener and a lat stretch. So go ahead and extend your arms above your head. Like our field goal is good. What we're going to be doing here is bringing our elbows down toward the ground. But before we do that, concentrate on Aaron's chin up there. Notice that he is not tucking his chin into his chest. He's keeping a very healthy posture there. So go ahead and gently draw your elbows down to the ground and act like you're trying to put your shoulder blades in your back pocket. So you should feel a slight stretch in your chest here. You should feel a slight stretch in your lats. Hold this for about 5 more seconds. And release. Okay, the last thing we're going to do to help our tech neck is some shoulder shrugs or some shoulder rolls. If you've got any kind of shoulder injury, then just go with the shrugs, leave out the rolls. Again, the main thing I want you to notice here is that Aaron's chin is not tucked into his chest. Even when his shoulders are up, he is keeping his chin in the correct position. So go ahead and use your lats to raise your shoulders up. Hold that for about 3 seconds and bring them back down. If you're able to do a shoulder roll, go ahead and roll 3 to the back. And then 3 to the front. Good. So these can be practiced as often as you feel that you need them. I would recommend a few times throughout the day and probably holding for greater than 10 seconds like we did today, but keep these in mind. And of course, if you or if any of your members have some kind of injury that doesn't allow you to do these, I'm definitely happy to provide any other ones or any kind of modifications. So we'll move on down to our lower cross syndrome. If we have an upper cross, we have to have a lower cross as well. So again, notice these 4 imbalances and these lower muscle groups. So in the back, we have a very tight lower back muscle there, paired with a weak abdominal from sitting all day. And then also in the back, very weak glutes, very weak hamstrings, paired with a tight psoas or hip flexor in the front. So I want to draw your attention to this image here where this person is standing. Notice how long this hip flexor muscle is. This attaches at our lower back and goes all the way down to the top of the leg and the bottom of the hip. It's a long muscle. And then notice here when we're sitting, that hip flexor takes a shortcut. It almost even curves a little bit because it doesn't need to be elongated when we're sitting. So when we are sitting all day, we are deactivating that hip flexor. It's getting tight, it's getting cold, and then when we stand up, it's going to pull on our lumbar spine and it's going to pull on our hip. So that's causing a lot of lower back pain and a lot of hip pain. So aside from deactivating that hip flexor, we're also deactivating our glutes and our hamstrings. A lot of us in our society have a very quad dominant problem, which leads to some knee problems as well. And then we've got some deactivated abdominals here in the front, which is why our back muscles are so tight down here. So sitting with this poor posture definitely affects the health of our spine. This is how we get this premature disc compression, premature disc degradation, herniated discs, and those sorts of things can all come from just sitting with this poor posture. So I want to bring you back to that first study that we looked at that showed that the isometric contraction while standing was enough to improve those metabolic biomarkers. Even just standing up and getting that isometric contraction, forcing our abdominals, forcing our glutes to hold us up while we stand is also enough most of the time to help combat some of that physical pain as well. So Erin was gracious enough to show us some lower body exercises too. So go ahead and stand up for these. So the first one is going to be for our hip flexor. This can be done on the floor. Erin is showing it on a bench here. We can do this on a chair. You can even, if you're flexible enough, get that foot up all the way up on your desk. Let's do this on our chairs today, but just be careful because I know your chairs in here have wheels on them. So, let's start with our right foot. So keeping your left foot on the ground. Keep your left foot.
Never fear, Aaron's here. All right.
Uh-oh.
There's Aaron. He's stretching.
All right, let's try again. There's Aaron. Okay, so sorry about that. I'm going to start with your left foot on the ground, right foot up on the chair. So this is our starting position. We're not moving the foot on the ground. All we're doing is just leaning into that foot that's on the chair. So you should feel that hip flexor stretch mostly in your left foot, the foot that's on the ground. You're going to feel it a little bit in your right side as well. If you are not feeling a stretch here, then go ahead and move the foot on the ground back a little bit.
Yeah, just have your flexible.
So hold that stretch, breathe through your stretch. Go ahead and bring your right foot back down to the ground and switch legs. So left foot up on the chair, lean into that left hip, lean completely forward. Remember to breathe through your stretch. Move the right foot on the ground back a little bit if you're not feeling that stretch. And release, foot back on the ground. So again, this is something that you can do multiple times a day. If you need just a quick couple second break. The next one we're going to stretch is our quadratus lumborum, abbreviated QL. That quadratus lumborum is that big muscle in our back that goes from the top of our hip there all the way through our lower back and even up to the middle part of the back as well. So notice Erin in this picture has a great posture up and down. Go ahead and cross your left foot over your right. If you're more comfortable with your left hand on your hip, go ahead and put it there. If not, it's fine to be down by its side. Take the right hand up over the head and lean into that left hip. So you should feel a stretch in your right side here. Straighten back to center. Bring that right hand down, uncross the legs, and then let's go ahead and cross right over left. So take that left hand above your head, lean into that right hip, and feel the stretch in your left side. All right, back to center and uncross. So our last one here is for our piriformis, which is a muscle that's deep in our glute/hip area there. This is one of those that's completely deactivated when we're sitting all day. So this is also known as a figure 4 stretch, so it should look like a figure 4 when you're doing this. This is one that you can do on the ground. This is one that you can do on your chair like Erin is here. Or if you're Barbara and have very stretchy hips, you can probably get that foot up on top of your desk. So we're going to do this in our chair. Go ahead and keep one foot on the ground. Bring that opposite foot up to that knee to make a figure 4. For some people, this is enough of a stretch. If it's not, go ahead and push down on that knee to get a deeper stretch. And if pushing down on that knee still is not a deep enough stretch, you can lean forward as Erin is doing in this photo here. Don't forget to breathe through your stretch. And come back up, foot back down, and switch legs. Hand on the knee, push down if you need a deeper stretch. Lean forward for an even deeper stretch, and hold it there. And release. All right. Well, that's for our lower cross syndrome. This is a great rule of thumb. If you remember nothing else, remember this. For every 30 minutes that you sit, stand up, stretch, or walk for 2 minutes. So keep this in mind. This is a great time to practice maybe one of these stretches, and then the next time, in the next 30 minutes, practice another one. So let's look more at our carpal tunnel syndrome. We kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. Look at this image on the right here. So we have this carpal ligament that's in our wrist, and underneath that, we've got some tendons and we have a nerve, and that's what's known as the carpal tunnel. So the median nerve is responsible for the feeling in our hand, in our wrist, and in our fingers, and the tendons that run through the carpal tunnel are responsible for any movement in our fingers. So when we make a fist, when we straighten our fingers back out, that's what those tendons are for. So when those tendons swell in the carpal tunnel, they push on that median nerve, which causes pain, and this is what we know of as carpal tunnel syndrome. So when we are using our keyboard or our mouse, or if we're someone that writes a lot during the day, we are using those tendons a whole lot. and that's where carpal tunnel comes from. So the whole goal here is to achieve this neutral wrist posture as often as possible. So look at this image on the bottom where the wrist here, of course, they've got their kickstand up on their keyboard. The wrist is extended in this position, and that's compressing those tendons in the wrist, and that's going to inflame them. Whereas if we put that kickstand down, that's going to be a little bit easier to achieve that neutral wrist posture. Even here, this person might have a flat keyboard, but their wrists are kind of going out to the left and to the right, and that's compressing the tendons in our wrists as well. So we want to practice good wrist health, good carpal tunnel health. Of course, there are some treatment and prevention options for these too. If you know someone or if you've had carpal tunnel, you may have gotten some of these recommendations from a doctor. Sometimes a doctor might recommend wearing a wrist splint or something to completely immobilize those tendons just to give them a chance to let the swelling go down. Sometimes that's not enough, and we need either like an over-the-counter or a prescription anti-inflammatory. Cortisone injection does the trick sometimes, or surgery may also be an option. So a lot of different things that a doctor might recommend, so definitely recommend talking with your doctor if you think that this might be an issue for you. There are some exercises and stretches that have been proven to be helpful, but research recently is showing that the stretches and the exercises are less likely to help if you have an actual carpal tunnel diagnosis, unless they're paired with one of these other things. So unfortunately, they're not enough on their own to treat carpal tunnel, but there are some pretty good options for prevention. So of course, we want to start with an ergonomically correct workstation. Taking frequent rest breaks from repetitive motions and repetitive movements, or just simply taking a rest break from being on your keyboard or on your mouse. And then there's some stretching exercises too, which of course we're going to practice. So the first one is a wrist stretch here. If you've got any wrist problems or carpal tunnel issues, just make sure that you're comfortable with these. And notice here that both in the extended and in the flex position, the goal is to get to a 90 degree. But if you're not there today, that's okay. So let's first start with our extended position. Take your wrist out in front of you. Gently use your opposite hand to push up on that wrist. And you should feel a stretch in the tendons of your wrist. So hold that there, again, anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds. Gently release, and then push down into the flex position. And release. Now let's switch hands for good measure. Extended first, gently push with that opposite hand. And then down into the flex position. Okay, release. And then this one is more of an exercise than a stretch. It's called tendon glides. So you start with an open-faced hand, a high five, out in front of you. Now think about moving each individual joint, bending each individual joint down at once to come into a fist. So if you repeat this 3 to 5 times, you're going to feel some activity in the tendons in your wrist here. And again, I mean, if these are exercises or stretches that you yourself or you have a member who can't do these for some reason, there's always a modification or a different exercise that we can provide. So when you've gotten your 3 to 5 on that hand, go ahead and switch to the other hand. One little joint at a time. And this is just to stop that repetitive motion. So we're getting a little bit of a different motion in our wrist. And once you've gotten your 3 to 5, you can stop. Okay, so the last common injury that we're going to talk about today is that computer vision syndrome, again, that we touched on a little bit earlier. Looking at a screen all day, whether it's your computer, your TV, or your cell phone, that's kind of like a repetitive motion injury for our eye muscles. And yes, we do have muscles in our eyes. That colored part of our eye is called the iris, and that's a muscle. And those muscles in our eyes are having to work really hard when we're viewing that blue light all day, every day. So here are some tips to help prevent those vision problems associated with screen time. First of all, definitely adjust the zoom or the font size on your computer so that you're not squinting. If you notice yourself squinting, go into your computer settings and zoom it in a little bit or make the font size bigger. I know that you can make the font size bigger on your cell phone as well so that you're not having to squint at that. Another thing that we don't think of too often is to avoid bright background lighting. So sometimes we like to sit at our desk and look out the window, but then not only are we getting the blue light from the computer, but we're also getting that bright sunlight coming into our eyes, which is causing vision problems as well. Other than the bright background lighting, ensuring that 18 to 30-inch viewing distance, or at least an arm's length away from your monitor. Honestly, this is a rule for your cell phone too, but no one does that. The correct way to hold your cell phone is with your bicep parallel to the ceiling. Extend it out in front of you. But we don't do that, unfortunately, so we really, really need to practice that safe viewing distance, either at our computer or at home. So we can also adjust our screen brightness to 50%. So that just takes the brightness down on our screen so that blue light isn't just staring us in the eyes as bad. But new cell phones and computers nowadays come with like a blue light reduction option where you can opt to have a yellowish or an orangish hue come up on your computer or your phone. I think they let you do that on timer too. So you can say, you know, at noon, halfway through my day, turn on my blue light blocker. So that's a great option too. Aside from the blue light blocker on your actual device, you know, lots of people who wear blue light blocker glasses.
I have some.
Yeah, they're great.
Well, no, one day this week there was a sleep doctor on there and they were talking about, you know, sleeping and how the blue lights affect
Yes, exactly.
the melatonin. And he was like, so if you're going to watch TV or use your phone before you go to bed, put on some blue blocker glasses.
Yeah.
I just died out loud. Y'all know what blue blocker?
Got some.
You know those girls?
I have some too.
Wear them all the time.
Yeah, but they're great. I mean, yeah, research is showing that they're preventing headaches and they're preventing migraines. Yeah.
It's supposed to have some kind of special thing on it.
Yeah.
You don't notice
I
it?
got a pair from my doctor.
Yeah, but they're great for migraines, especially if, you know, you're someone that looks at your computer all day long if you have to for work. And then, of course, you know, taking regular breaks from computer use. So that's not only, you know, every 30 minutes you sit, stand up. Every 30 minutes that you look at your computer, take a look at just like a blank piece of paper or a blank wall or something with not a lot of stimulus, just to give your eyes a little break to refocus. So, of course, there are some exercises that we can do with our eyes too. So we're going to do these. We'll do these with our eyes closed. Take a look at the first one, where the person is moving their eyes from left to right. So go ahead and close your eyes. Look your eyes all the way to the left, and then slowly all the way to the right. And do that 2 more times with your eyes closed. And open your eyes up when you're done. So that's a great exercise just to help your eyes refocus, give those muscles a little bit of a break from staring at the same thing. Let's do the bottom one now, so that up and down motion. So close your eyes, look all the way up toward the ceiling, all the way down towards the ground, and do that 2 more times. And open back up. And yeah, again, if you're not comfortable with the eyes closed thing, you can do this with your eyes open, but try not to look at that computer screen while you're doing it. Focus on a blank piece of paper, a blank wall, something that's not blue light. All right, so some big takeaways from today's session is first and foremost that our bodies were just not built for sitting or standing, for that matter, in the same position all day long, or repeating the same motion over and over. So keep this in mind when you're at work. You know, our employer is really great about getting us standing desks and letting us take walking breaks and things like that. So definitely keep that in mind and take advantage of those things. again, going back to that first study that we looked at, that showed that standing is enough to stimulate that LPL activity. And when we looked at lower cross syndrome, that shows that even just standing up is enough to kind of stretch out that hip flexor and prevent some of that physical pain. I mean, standing and just getting that isometric contraction can work wonders for our physical health and our metabolic health. And like I said, if you remember nothing else, remember this: for every 30 minutes that you sit, try to walk, stretch, or at least stand up just for 2 minutes. Erin's been standing the entire time. I wanted to show you too, I had mentioned that checklist from the National Institute of Health. This is just an example of the first page of it, but you can see that they divide it up into the chair and the keyboard and the mouse, and I have it right here actually. They have another page with your work surface, your laptop, and things like that. So if you do think that some of your pain or some of your injuries might be coming from that ergonomic positioning, this might be a good resource to check out. Here are the other research articles that we looked at today. What questions or comments do you have?
This was great. I wish I would have known this 30 years ago.
I'm glad you thought so.
I know that in one of the studies you mentioned, it takes just 2 weeks of going back to city before all the damage is done again. Are there any studies saying how long does it take
to reverse that?
To actually get benefits?
There probably are. That's a good question. I'm going to look for some. I know that particular study, those things were measured over a 7-week period. And like I said, they didn't do any biologic kind of, or metabolic or biological kind of testing, but they did send surveys throughout the study. So yeah, we can probably look back at that study and see. I would bet that if like 54% said that they improved their health by the end of the 7 weeks, I would guess that maybe just increased as the study went on. But yeah, that's a great point. Isn't that sad that 2 weeks just completely negated all of those results? It makes a difference.
Do
Yes.
we have the capability on our computers to decrease the blue line?
You do. I'll show you how.
Okay.
Yes.
One of my friends said she has a serious problem with dry eye.
Yeah.
And her doctor, who is a specialist in dry eye, told her that kids these days are going to grow up with eye issues because of how much screen time that they are using.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
She said it's going to be akin to the melanoma skin cancer that my age group is dealing with.
Because they just didn't know.
Screen.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's a great point.
It isn't a laughable matter. It's a serious
No,
thing.
it's a big deal. Yeah, and thankfully, like I said, more research is coming out about it, so now we know, so we can start getting those goofy blue blocker glasses or blocking our blue light. But they are funny. But yes, I will show you how to turn on the blue blocker on your computer.
Okay, thank you.
Julie says, what are your thoughts about the braces that are available for shoulders to help you keep the right posture? I think that if you have a serious problem with your posture, that's great. I would think that it would be more sustainable for you to practice postural exercises and stretches to help permanently improve your posture, but definitely using one of those braces to start off with, just kind of get that muscle memory for that correct posture. That's a good question, Julie. What other questions do you have? Heather?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So for the holiday party, I won this cushion that goes on your chair. It's an air
Yeah.
cushion. Do you have any knowledge about those and how they're made?
I don't. That's why I wanted to sit in yours the other day. I had never seen one before. But what are you feeling since you started to use it?
Less pressure, like on my tailbone.
Yeah, I can
allows
imagine.
me to change my position more often and core strength and posture. So
Yeah.
I love it so far.
I'm curious about it. I mean, they make those chairs that you've all probably seen with like the medicine ball or the big physio ball where like it sits in a stand and it has a back. And I know the big purpose of those are that it kind of forces you to sit up, otherwise you'll fall right out of your chair. So I kind of wondered if that seat thing had anything to do with that. Yeah.
I've seen research about those stability balls,
Yeah.
seats that says,
Yeah, kind of dangerous, right?
because you still end up slumping. You
can
Right.
still slump. So, like when I work with my silver sneakers, I mean, we work in a chair, we have them sit away from the back of the chair.
So
and
they're
sit up,
forced
so
to keep
they
their
have to engage
posture.
their back and their abdominals, and
Yeah.
goes over the shoulders.
Totally. Well,
And I find that I sit that way.
right. Well, and that goes with like using the ergonomically correct chair. Like take advantage of that chair. Otherwise, you're just going to slump and disengage those abdominals in the front. Yeah. What else?
I have another question.
Yeah.
What about in your car?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Driving, distance.
Well, same thing with the car. They are supposedly designed with ergonomically correct positioning. So take advantage of that. I mean, make contact with all the contact points on the seat of the car, including the headrest, which a lot of us probably don't use, and that's where a lot of our tight neck flexors are coming from. So it's kind of awkward to start doing that, but if you can find like that, that sweet spot where your backrest is up enough and your headrest is up enough so that you can kind of lean back on that, I think it will make you feel so much better.
Something for guys.
Yep.
If you have a big wallet, you get your car and you're sitting on it, now you have taken your fitness out of the hand.
Yes, or anywhere sitting on your
Right.
wallet.
So it's always recommended to take the wallet out so that you can actually sit on both your hips.
Yeah, have you seen like x-rays that they've done for guys that have been sitting on their wallets, just the discrepancy in both sides of the hip and the spine?
Wow.
And they have pain.
I was like that.
Yeah,
Yes.
it makes a huge
Money
difference.
in that wallet.
No, it certainly wasn't that money.
Yes, you're right. Touche, Aaron.
Why go into a backpack?
Yep.
Bring my fanny pack. They are. You haven't seen them? They are.
Julie asked another question. She said, also would love to know, Julie says she also would love to know more about quad dominance issues.
You guys hear that?
Yes.
So, yeah, we talked about that when we were looking at the lower cross syndrome. So when we're sitting all day, we are deactivating our glutes and our hamstrings, and probably our quads too. But as a society, we're these people that sit all day, and when we get up, we are using that big quad muscle in the front. Even when we go upstairs, if we're putting most of our pressure on the front of our foot, we're recruiting those muscles in the front of our leg as opposed to the back of our leg. If you notice the next time you go upstairs, get your full foot on that step and try to put most of the pressure on your heel, and you'll feel that you're recruiting most of your glutes, those posterior leg muscles. So the quad dominance thing is an issue because that's pulling more on that side of our knee. And so if we're more quad dominant, we're more likely to have more knee problems as well, hip problems too. Yes. Anything else? Nick?
And you said like you're like looking kind of at the top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I've just started to put it up a little bit higher, so I have to like raise my head up.
Yeah.
That's helped my neck. Is there any like?
Well, that aside from the point of that is so that you can look past your monitor. But that is a good point because at any point during the day, we want to be in such a posture so that if you were to fall asleep, your neck would fall backwards instead of forwards. But think about how many times have you been like a passenger in a long car ride or driving on it or sitting in an airplane and you're falling asleep and your head is bobbing forward. That's not the posture we want. It's healthier for our neck to be in such a position. If we're in a good posture, our chin is up, we'll tilt our head backwards if we were to fall asleep and just like lose control for whatever reason. So that is a good point, Nick.
But then when you force the discs or things that are here in an awkward position.
Well, if you're sitting back in a chair, that'll stop your head there. Whereas if we
And that
this way,
you're
we're
not
gonna-
dropping like you were doing, dropping all the way back, because I never recommend that people drop their head back.
No.
because of the stiffness.
Well, yeah, we don't want that either. But yeah, that's a good thought, aside from being able to take your eyes away from the screen. Anything else? Questions, comments? Okay, well, thank you guys for coming. It was a good discussion.
So we have Journal Club. So all of you should get an invitation, right, to join our
Yes.
Journal Club discussion. Where we'll be
Next week.
discussing Research articles relative to this topic. So We'll invite you all next week, right?
Yep, next Wednesday.
Wednesday. All right.
Thanks, Lindsay.
You're very welcome.